The thing that I cannot shake from Oppenheimer, after seeing the movie 3 times and thinking about it nonstop for 2 months now, preparing for this episode, is this one refrain. And it's this question that's asked throughout the movie by Kitty to Oppenheimer. And the question is, why won't you fight? Mm-hmm. And it's at all these different points in the movie where you think we're nearing a climax of the film, and she'll like throw something at the wall and ask him that question. And he never directly answers it. But I've been looking for possible answers in my memory in the subsequent viewings, and I've come up with a couple ideas that I want to get your read on, Maggie.
Okay, sounds good.
I think the first answer is that he doesn't know who he's fighting. The thing that was so dazzling as you get to the end of your first viewing is Strauss's treachery. When you see that black and white scene of him coaching Oppenheimer through this easy renewal process that you know is this Trojan horse where he's going to try to ruin his life.
Yes.
Oppenheimer, this genius who you're so dazzled by in the first act, when you see him running through all these universities, he's brilliant. You see all those, like, I don't know, Windows screensaver shots of science exploding in his head.
Yes.
When he looks so smart, and then he's so bamboozled by the end of the movie.
Yes.
It is possible. I think it's a rational explanation that maybe he just doesn't know who he's fighting because he doesn't know who the enemy is until the end of the movie when, the mask is ripped off like the end of Scooby-Doo and Strauss is sitting there.
Sure. And in part of it, he could be feeling that one of the enemies or a possible enemy is himself because he's like feeling so much like not regret over what happened, but complex moral qualms about what he's done and what he could do going forward. So it's very messy for him internally.
And he seems to be grappling with that for decades.
Yes.
And never truly understanding. I mean, even if a human could understand the ramifications of what he did.
Right.
The butterfly effect. The global tectonic shift for all time that his decisions wrought here. The other explanation is maybe he doesn't know how to fight. I'm reminded of that line earlier in the film of Oppenheimer couldn't run a burger stand. He's naive and inexperienced about normal things, or about politics or people in a way that most brilliant people are.
Right, because they're so hyper-focused on their area that they don't... I mean, it's like Sherlock not knowing that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Yes, I heard a story when I was studying philosophy in college about a professor who's the smartest person I've ever met or ever will meet, who was just like standing at a stop sign for 20 minutes and the students had to like go get him and bring him to class. Like that kind of thing happens all the time.
Incredible.
So maybe he doesn't know how to fight this sort of like, cloak and dagger political sort of fight. Maybe he doesn't know who he's fighting. And the third example, which I think is more compelling for me, is that he thinks he deserves this. Because Nolan, he peppers this question in throughout this long-ass script. Why won't you fight? And I was trying to find out on subsequent viewings if he ever gives us an answer. And on the third viewing, it hit me and I felt stupid because, yes, he explicitly writes out the answer on the screen at the beginning of the movie. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to man. For this, he was chained to a rock and tortured for eternity. Einstein's final revelation to Oppenheimer at the end of the movie is about punishment.
Yes.
And he means it as a warning for how long they're going to punish you, and then eventually they'll give you these meaningless accolades.
Yes,
But watching Oppenheimer's face, that like total discomfort and dismay and fear and regret, all of those brilliant emotions that are tattooed across Cillian Murphy's face in the final couple seconds of the movie, I took that to mean that Oppenheimer thinks that all of this punishment, all of these floggings and condemnations and career sabotage, that he thinks all of that is just.
Yeah.
As he starts to understand the ramifications of what's happening.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a very similar dichotomy to another question I saw people grappling with around the announcement and release of this movie. Does the film condemn or glorify Oppenheimer?
Yeah.
And I would answer yes to both.
I would too. That's such a like simplified view of this movie.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
You can't. That's not the point. It's not Oppenheimer good or Oppenheimer bad.
But the strength of the movie is that it does both of those things at the same time.
Yes.
It throws that contradiction in your face and makes you grapple with it instead of the artist doing all of the moral wrangling first
Yeah.
And then you just being a baby that's fed the applesauce. You never have to chew anything for yourself.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like that at all.
Well, in Oppenheimer, the character, I think, also answers yes to both of those questions as well. Because you see him regretting it and thinking he deserves all this punishment and torture, like you said. But you also, like, you never hear him say, I regret Hiroshima or Nagasaki, or like, and you see him like feeling like, yeah, I deserve this position at Princeton, and yeah, I know Einstein, and I'm really smart and great. Like, he's really complex, and he is not proud of what he did, but is kind of proud of what he did, but also deeply regrets it and is terrified by what he did. It's very confusing.
There are so many crescendos of this movie. I mean, towards the end, you get Strauss and Oppenheimer both on trial, but not on trial.
Right,
and
both of them.
They both don't get something, but it's not even something huge. Like an obligatory cabinet position that wouldn't do much for Strauss, he doesn't get. Oppenheimer, a security clearance that he hasn't really needed in 30 years, he doesn't get.
Yeah.
It's not incredibly, I don't know, consequential in the scope of these men's lives.
But they're both very symbolic of important things for them.
And there are plenty of other crescendos through the movie that are much more important and declarative from a character standpoint that aren't titanic in these people's lives. But they go in both directions, these crescendos. Nolan presents both sides. There's perfect balance in this script, I think, because you get the montages of Oppenheimer's transcendent brilliance with all the Windows screensaver stuff about the smart science explosive, pop rocks shit. You get that, and you get these amazing runaway, screeching, mustache-twirling monologues from Strauss, and that's where you get the condemnation of him. And all those are true. It's Strauss who points out that Oppenheimer has never said he regrets Hiroshima.
Exactly, yes.
He builds to this beautiful thesis that is as strong as any of the, wow, holy shit, look at how smart Oppenheimer is. You get this crescendo of Strauss almost screaming that Oppenheimer is the most important man who's ever lived. And if I pull right back to that initial question that keeps bugging me from Kitty, why won't you fight? I think the answer is that he kind of doesn't need to.
Because he's too important? Is that what you mean?
Yes, the line from the movie, you're not just self-important, you're actually important. There's no analysis or takedown or hit piece that can change Oppenheimer's role. Even when the film ends with so many people turning against him in their testimonies, I mean, this pile-on of witnesses letting him down, it's a reverse It's a Wonderful Life. At the end of the movie.
Totally.
But I think the point there is that Oppenheimer, unlike the leads in that movie, he's not a fundamentally good or bad man.
Right.
He's not George Bailey.
Right, because important doesn't mean good, and it doesn't mean bad.
He's not a good or bad man. He's an important man, and we are stuck with him.
Yes. Like it or not, he was important, and he doesn't go away.
What he did doesn't
important. Go away. Forever.
Right.
Like, I'm not being dramatic. Like,
every time
forever.
you see an article about North Korea, Oppenheimer's important again.
Right.
Yes, it's the ramifications. It's the butterfly effect. There's almost no answer to this call and response because we're still feeling it. Even the final shot of the movie where you get that nightmare scenario of nuclear war, that's somewhere in the future.
Yes.
But it feels inevitable now.
It does.
You can hear the echo of it even though it hasn't happened yet.
Especially with this movie coming out in the 2020s.
Yes.
You know?
And you end the movie locked in that stasis, in that certainty, where you get this echo or bookend of the thing that started the movie. The pop rocks thing of him being so smart and having these explosions of science in his mind.
Sure.
The movie ends with him being haunted by visions of scientific futures, where he sees that future nuclear war. But now he's not seeing scientific innovation and breakthroughs from the hungry, almost adolescent view
like,
he
what
had
can
at
we
the
do?
beginning.
What are the possibilities? Yeah, now it's like, oh God, what are the possibilities?
What have I done?
Yes.
He's seeing it from the other side, and it's bringing you full circle.
Yes.
And he looks so haunted and gaunt and ruined. And yes, Maggie, I'm glad you asked. That is a Faustian evolution.
Oh boy.
Because this man signed a contract for unimaginable power at the cost of his soul. And the end of the movie is him understanding the breadth of his damnation. It is him grappling with his eternal legacy and culpability for all future nuclear war.
Yes.
If we're alive after the bombs go off, in the Wikipedia entry, he will be right there to click on.
Yes, that's true.
And I want to chase that idea further. I'm playing with Faustus for a second.
Okay, that sounds good.
Nolan's critique here is not just in setting Oppenheimer up as a Faustian character. I think that's fairly simple, but he goes much further than that.
Okay.
And I think it's in his framing of Mephistopheles, who, of course, in Faustus is the demon.
Great.
He's the demon who presents the contract to Faustus, who promises him all these things. He is the agent of temptation and trickery, corruption, damnation. And the play is largely the interplay between these two characters after Faustus signs the contract, and you get the 24 years of service from Mephistopheles. And at the end, he's dragged down to hell, tries to escape the contract, and he can't.
Right.
If Oppenheimer is Faustus, the acclaimed academic who throws it all away for forbidden divine power, which it is called at some point in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
The power to destroy worlds.
Yeah.
Then who is his Mephistopheles? And I've struggled with this for a couple weeks now.
Yeah.
And I think there's one answer.
Okay.
I think it has to be Matt Damon's General Groves.
Okay.
He's the guy who comes to Faustus, who waves this opportunity in front of him.
And says, hey, you need to do this thing.
All the power, all the control, the riches, the legacy, the rewards, and then they serve through that contract together.
Yeah.
And then at the end, the Faustus, Oppenheimer, tries to get out of it. Oh, well, we built a bomb, but we don't need to use it as a bomb. And none of that works.
Of course.
And he's dragged down to hell, and he sees what he's wrought, and all the bad shit
And
happens.
he ends up being, he helps select the city in Japan they're going to bomb,
So I think it's absolutely General Groves.
Interesting.
But let's chase that a little further.
Okay.
Because who is General Groves? Mephistopheles is not Satan.
Right.
He's not Lucifer.
No, he is a demon from hell. He's like an agent.
He's a middleman.
Almost.
Yes. He's a travel agent. He is a middleman of a much larger institution.
Yeah.
But let's pursue the implications of that framing a little further.
Okay, yeah.
Who is the head of that institution? In Faustus, Mephistopheles' boss is Lucifer.
Right.
Who appears, see if this sounds familiar,
oh boy,
in exactly one scene as a sneering, victorious fat cat leading the parade of 7 deadly sins.
Oh my God.
And this is the real landmine that Nolan is hiding at the center of this script. Yes, Oppenheimer is blind and falls for temptation. He does the whole Faustus shtick, and he dooms the world. But the Lucifer in this movie is Truman.
Right.
Who has a one-scene appearance, basking in the glow of his horrors, with blood on his hands, which doesn't concern him at all.
No.
He mocks the ethical qualms of this Faustian character.
Calls him a crybaby. The bombs, the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, those are the parade of the 7 deadly sins that you would get in Faustus. And it's fairly incredible. I mean, apart from the Faustus framing, which I always appreciate. Of course.
It's fairly incredible to stage the American war machine like this. As
the devil?
in a mainstream biopic that's going to close just under $1 billion and isn't being viewed as terribly politically subversive or out of the realm of the normal.
Right. That's
unbelievable.
That's very, very good. I like that a lot. That's really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm thinking about, and because I haven't read Dr. Faustus. I mean, I feel like I have at this point because you talked about it with me so much. But I have a question.
10 years.
So, because I think it's maybe a little bit unfair to characterize Oppenheimer's agreement to run the Manhattan Project as him giving into temptation, because we see him really justify his decision by saying over and over, we have to do this, because if we don't do this, Germany's going to do this, and the Nazis cannot have a nuclear bomb. That is very, 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 very bad. And so he is doing it in a way to prevent destruction, to save his own people, because he's a Jew, to save his own people and to save his country. And even though he feels torn about it, he feels like it's the right decision. And I think there is an element of, I want to be powerful, I deserve this renown and whatever. But I think he's really, at least initially, driven by a desire to do the right thing. And so what my question for you is, when Faustus signs his contract, what is his reasoning and his justification?
Well, he's an aging, frustrated academic who thinks he's gotten everything out of the world that he can and hit the peaks of knowledge and achievement. And he only sees the things that are past philosophy, the things that are past theology, which is proof. Evidence. Traveling the world, doing the magic carpet ride, the Dante's Inferno, traveling the realms and understanding these things that no mortal has ever seen.
Okay.
So yes, there's something altruistic in that. The pursuit of knowledge is the most fundamentally human motivation.
Sure.
But there's also an element of ego to it. There's that unsatisfiable, sort of selfish, wanting the credit for the thing, wanting to be the one guy who knocks down that final domino and achieves something no other human has ever been able to.
Yeah, not just I want this information to be found out, but I want to be the one to find it out.
And it's that flash of ego when Groves is meeting Oppenheimer and presenting what he's heard about Oppenheimer to him, where you see Oppenheimer sort of luxuriate in that.
He does. He doesn't approach it like, what? You want me to run? He's like, oh yeah, so you heard of me.
He's kind of flattered.
He's like, my name came up.
A little competitive.
And at one point he's like assuming he has the job, and Groves is like, oh, so you have the job now? And he's like, yeah, of course I do.
And this is usually where I diverge with literary criticism of Faustus, because I don't think the pursuit of knowledge, especially whatever we're going to call forbidden knowledge at whatever time and place we're discussing.
Sure.
I refuse to demonize that.
Of course.
And there are some readings of Faustus that blame him for chasing that knowledge.
Right. I mean, but that goes back to the Adam and Eve story. That's the tree they eat from, is the tree of knowledge. So makes sense.
I think
I mean, I disagree with that fundamentally, which is why I'm a big part of why I'm not religious. But like, I understand that reading of the play is what I'm saying. Yeah.
I think it's more that touch of ego that's interesting. That's the humanity.
Yes. That's the flaw. That's the sin.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the tagline of Dr. Faustus could be one of the other troubling refrains that is repeated through this movie. Theory will only take you so far.
Oh, that's great. That's good.
You begin Faustus at the end of Theory. He trashes his office.
Right.
And then he seeks out these books of black magic. And that's the only thing he hasn't seen and mastered. And that's when he tries summoning a demon, just to see if there is more he can get to.
So Faustus's theology is Oppenheimer's theoretical physics. And the contract and the understanding of the knowledge is making the bomb.
Because he doesn't understand the implications of what's going to happen to him until the moment the demons pop out of the ground and drag him down to hell.
Yeah.
And he thinks he can weasel and talk his way out of it until the very end. And it's as relatable as it is tragic. What he's going through, and that he can't see that.
Yeah.
Because you can relate to what he's doing at the beginning. You can relate to that yearning, that desire for new worlds and experiences.
Yeah, and that's how you feel in Oppenheimer. You're like, of course he's going to agree to do this. He has to serve his country and like defeat the Nazis and prevent them from causing more destruction.
And then there's that inevitable shoe. There's that sword of Damocles hanging over you, and you're waiting for that to drop.
And they continue to move forward with the project after Hitler has died.
And I think Marlowe does something similar to Nolan here, where it's not just a condemnation of the character. It's not just an endorsement of the character. It's that humanity. It's that moral struggle. When the lights come up, you feel uneasy.
Yes.
Because you don't know how to feel about what you've just seen, but you're fascinated by it.
Especially as an American.
Yes.
I mean, anybody watching this movie is going to feel a lot of this stuff, but I think it hits you especially hard if you are from the country that did this.
Like all great stories, and Oppenheimer is now one of our great stories. There are shades of Faustus shot throughout this movie. And it just, I loved it.
Yeah.
You know me.
That's of all the times you said like, oh, this is a Faustus story. I'm like, okay, I see what you're saying and it works, but no, I think this one really does work. And I think,
well, thank you.
Which is really interesting given that this is a literal true story. But I mean, that
it's also a dramatic retelling of history,
it is,
which is like almost everything Shakespeare did.
Well, right.
And Marlowe was kind of doing that of a German folktale, the Faust book.
And it also just speaks to the how great a tale that folktale is, and how it, I mean, especially like in its original state, but then especially in the way that Marlowe told it. And so it speaks to the relevancy and the repetition of history. And that's also really, which is also like a theme of the movie, like history repeating itself. So that's all really, really fun to unpack. That's a fantastic theory. Well done.